So I am trying an experiment where I use the new NotebookLM beta features, interactive mode, to playfully interact with a podcast focused on my short narrative RPG advertising and you can see the podcast is already generated and loaded. Within interactive mode, we can begin like this. I'll start the play. It'll go through the podcast.
Welcome back, listeners. Today we're taking a
And I'll
deep
hit
dive
join
into the cyberpunk
when I want
world
to jump in.
using this cool tabletop role-playing game, Advertising and Antiheroes.
Sounds intriguing.
We're not going to get too bogged down in the rules or anything.
Right.
But we'll use these prompts to create characters and explore like what kind of crazy ad campaigns they might cook up in a dystopian future. Think neon signs, corporate conspiracies, the whole nine yards.
Such a great setup. Okay, my turn to bring a character to life now.
Yeah, hit me. Who you got?
Meet Jinx Switch Rodriguez. She's a holographic narrative designer, one of those visionary creatives who can craft these immersive, mind-blowing storytelling experiences.
Whoa, that's a seriously cool job, especially in a cyberpunk world. I bet she's in high demand.
Oh, absolutely. But Jinx has a secret. She's battling a serious addiction to Memenhans.
Memenhans? What's that?
They're memory-enhancing drugs. They give you this incredible mental edge, but with some pretty nasty side effects.
Yikes. So she's pushing the boundaries of technology, but also struggling with its dark side.
Exactly. And her false belief is that these drugs are the key to her success. She thinks she needs them to reach her full potential, you know?
I can see how that would be a slippery slope, especially in a world that values productivity.
Oh, hey there. What's up?
Hey, I'm really excited by the character Jinx. Can you suggest a sort of physical description that could serve as a metaphor for aspects of her personality or beliefs, or otherwise reveal her character?
That's a fantastic question. I love how you're thinking about character design. So for Jinx, imagine her with constantly shifting iridescent tattoos that glitch and flicker.
Ooh, like a visual representation of her unstable mental state caused by the Memenhans.
Precisely. And perhaps she has these cybernetic augmentations around her eyes, like enhanced lenses that are constantly calibrating, always trying to process more information, but also maybe hiding a deeper exhaustion.
That's a great visual metaphor for her addiction and her desperate need to stay on top of things. So tragic, but relatable. But you said she had a redeeming quality too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Jinx is deeply empathetic.
Or sterile. Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
Hey, I'm wondering if you could tell me how Danny and Jinx might react being asked to create a political campaign for an unqualified young movie star running for mayor.
That's a really interesting twist. It's taking the advertising challenges we've been discussing and putting them into a different context.
Yeah, it's like instead of a product, they're selling a person, and a flawed one at that. Let's see, how might they approach this?
Well, for Danny, who is our disillusioned artist, this could be a real clash of values. Remember, his false belief is that only real artists lead meaningful lives, and he sees himself as a sellout.
Right, so he's already got this cynicism, this distrust of the system, and now he's being asked to promote someone he probably doesn't believe in.
Exactly. He might try to use his artistic skills to subtly mock the candidate. Maybe his campaign posters are ironically posed or lit, highlighting the absurdity of it all.
I love it. Like, he's working within the system, but his true feelings are just below the surface in the subtext of his work. It's also worth remembering that he might just go through the motions, doing the bare minimum and hating himself for it.
Which is totally in character for him. Now, Jinx, she's a different case. She wants to connect with people, but her addiction and her belief that drugs are the key to her success complicates things.
Yeah, this political campaign for a movie star could tap into her desire to create meaningful connections, but she might also try to use the campaign to her own advantage.
What's fascinating here is how her skills as a holographic narrative designer could be used to, manufacture a persona, craft a story that makes this unqualified candidate seem like the perfect leader.
I can see it now. She's creating these immersive, mind-blowing campaign rallies, holographic projections of the candidate giving inspiring speeches, even though he's maybe never said any of that stuff before.
Absolutely. She might even use her technology to erase or edit out any of his missteps, building up this almost mythical persona.
And all of this while she's using the Memenhans to, in her mind, reach her full potential. So she could be creating this whole campaign based on falsehoods. But does that make it any less meaningful for her?
That's a really interesting point. Perhaps her addiction and her drive for success would convince her that this is what the people need, that she's using her skills for the good of the city.
So it's like both Danny and Jinx are wrestling with their own personal demons while simultaneously trying to sell this movie star to the masses.
And the game, as we've mentioned, is all about these complex characters, these moral quandaries, and how their individual flaws shape their creative choices.
Right. But he's also got this self-sabotaging streak, that false
Fat-grown organs, marketed as the solution to all the pollution-induced diseases.
whoa.
Or how about cybernetic limbs, but targeted at factory workers who got injured on the job, almost like a necessary evil in this hyper-industrialized world.
It's dark, man.
Oh, hey, our listener wants to join in. What's up?
Hey, I'm wondering what you think might be things that could happen if the setting wasn't a cyberpunk future, but 1990s Hong Kong. What might they sell, and what challenges might the characters face?
That's a fantastic question. Shifting the setting to 1990s Hong Kong really opens up some interesting possibilities, right?
Oh, totally. It's a completely different vibe, but still with plenty of potential for those anti-hero stories that we're talking about. Okay, so 1990s Hong Kong, let's unpack this.
Well, think about the advertising landscape then. It was a time of rapid economic growth in Hong Kong. A lot of consumerism was taking off, but with a unique cultural spin.
Right, so you'd see a mix of traditional Chinese aesthetics and Western influences, all competing for attention.
What's fascinating here is how that tension would play out in the campaign. Imagine a product trying to appeal to both the younger, more Western influenced generation and the older, more traditional one.
Yeah. Maybe they're selling imported electronics or trendy fashion, but they'd still have to tap into those cultural values like family or, filial piety.
Exactly. So you might have a tech company trying to sell pagers or early mobile phones, but framing it as a way to stay connected with your family, not just a status symbol.
Or what about those high-end department stores trying to attract customers, but also not wanting to alienate the more modest folks? That's tricky.
This raises an important question about the anti-hero characters. A character like our photographer Danny in 1990s Hong Kong might be wrestling with preserving traditional art forms while working in this very modern, very commercial landscape.
Ooh, yeah. Maybe he's torn between capturing the city of neon-lit streets and the old temples and alleyways. Maybe he feels like he's losing touch with the heart of the city.
And Jinx, our holographic narrative designer, well, she might be exploring new media like karaoke videos or even early internet advertising and the ethics of it, maybe even struggling with her own identity in a changing Hong Kong.
And what kind of challenges would they face? Well, the game mentions things like landing a new client, office politics, or even bad business that could result in someone being let go.
Right. And now we can explore how these things would be inflicted by the cultural context of 1990s Hong Kong. I'd imagine that there'd be some tensions between local and foreign workers, generational divides, things like that.
For sure. And the source material also talks about characters' false beliefs or that one thing they believe will make them happy and how that could influence their actions or put them in conflict.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, 1990s Hong Kong is this fascinating crossroads of cultures and idea. Right before the handover, our anti-heroes would be navigating all of that while also, trying to make a living in the world of advertising.
Yeah, it's this really unique time period that could influence all their choices. It gives the game so many possibilities, that's for sure. Now, where were we? Oh, yeah, discussing how messed up some of these products could be in a cyberpunk world.
Precisely. And thinking about your question, maybe the advertising methods would be different in Hong Kong. Less, say, targeted, more a blend of cultures.
Yeah. Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
Hey, how about if we change the setting to a late 1950s Western Europe, where consumer culture is just coming back after the recovery from the war?
Oh, wow, that's another great idea. Late 1950s Western Europe is a fascinating setting. It's a time of rebuilding and rediscovering consumerism.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're talking post-war, right? A time of optimism and a real push for progress and modernity.
Exactly. There's a sense of things getting better, and that would definitely affect how they're selling things. It's very different than a cyberpunk world.
Right, so you've got this new wave of consumer culture emerging. People are like ready to spend after years of wartime austerity.
And you're seeing a lot of new products entering the market, things that were maybe scarce or unavailable during the war years.
Yeah, so think like those newfangled appliances, right? Refrigerators, washing machines, all those things that promise to make life easier, more modern.
What's fascinating here is how advertising would have to tap into that sense of optimism and new possibilities, but with a nod to the recent past. For sure. And those moral dilemmas, they really get you thinking. Danny struggling with his art, Jinx and her addiction.
I mean, oh yeah, let's hear it.
Hey, I'm wondering how Jinx might serve as a foil for Danny.
That's a great question. Let's unpack this. How would Jinx, the holographic narrative designer, act as a foil for Danny, the photographer?
Well, think about their core motivations. Danny's driven by this desire to be a real artist, right? He sees the corporate world as a betrayal of his true calling.
Right. He's always trying to escape, but maybe he's looking in the wrong places. And Jinx is kind of the opposite.
What's fascinating here is Jinx is immersed in the tech world, right? She's using cutting edge technology to tell stories for these big corporations, but she's got her own struggles.
Yeah, her addiction to Nemenhans is a way to try and succeed in the system. She believes that they are the key to her success, while Danny sees the system as a prison.
Exactly. So Danny is searching for authenticity outside of the corporate world, while Jinx is searching for it within it. It's like they're both looking for something similar, but they're taking completely opposite approaches.
And if you think about their jobs, Danny's a photographer who captures images, while Jinx is a narrative designer who builds entire immersive worlds. They are both storytellers in a way, but they have very different styles.
This raises an important question about their values. Danny's longing for the past, or at least for the authentic, while Jinx is all about pushing the boundaries of the present with technology.
Yeah. Maybe Danny, with his old school ways, thinks Jinx's narratives are too manipulative, too artificial. And maybe Jinx thinks Danny is like stuck in the past, too afraid to embrace the future.
And what kind of challenges would they face? Well, like we said, the game has things like landing a new client, office politics, and bad business. But they would each handle them so differently.
For sure. Like Danny might try to make some kind of subtle artistic statement through his work to challenge the status quo, while Jinx might try to leverage her position.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Hey, I'm wondering how Jinx and Danny might come to appreciate each other's redeeming qualities.
Oh, that's a lovely question. It really makes you think about their potential for growth.
Absolutely. And it's not just about how they're different, but also how their struggles can help them understand each other.
Okay, so let's unpack this. You're asking how Jinx and Danny might eventually appreciate each other's redeeming qualities, right?
Yes, and what's fascinating here is that they both have so much to offer, but their flaws might be what stands in their way.
Yeah, like Danny, he's got this deep passion for art, that underlying ember we were talking about, but he's so caught up in his cynicism that he can't really see it in himself.
And Jinx is driven by this desire to connect with people, to create something meaningful. Her empathy is a strong redeeming quality, but her addiction and false belief clouds her judgment.
It's almost like they need to see those qualities in each other first in order to find it in themselves.
If we connect this to their jobs, Danny, as a photographer, might come to appreciate the power of Jinx's narrative design and the way she can craft these immersive worlds.
Yeah, maybe he starts to see that her technology isn't always manipulative, that it can actually be a way to connect with people, to move them the way real art can.
And Jinx, on the other hand, might start to see the value of Danny's more traditional art. That capturing real images can be just as powerful, maybe even more so in some cases, than a simulation.
Maybe she sees the authenticity in his work, that honest, unfiltered vision he has, and that begins to challenge her own false belief.
This raises an important question about how they might begin to see eye to eye. Perhaps a situation occurs where they are forced to collaborate, and they begin to recognize what the other one brings to the table.
For sure. Maybe Jinx needs some of Danny's 3D photography skills for one of her holographic campaigns, and he's like shocked at how effectively she's able to use it.
And perhaps Danny comes to realize that he could use Jinx's storytelling abilities to add more depth and nuance to his own art and get it noticed, get it out there.
And that connection could also help them confront their own flaws, help each other challenge those false beliefs they both have.
Maybe they start to realize that both the corporate world and the art world have things to offer, and that true fulfillment isn't about choosing one over the other, but maybe integrating life.
Exactly. It's not about escaping or denying, but about finding your place in it and using your strengths for something good.
And maybe they both start to see that their unique strengths and even their flaws are in some ways what makes them valuable.